The morning bell rang across Jefferson High School as students rushed to their classrooms. In room 237, Tom Wilson arranged his teaching materials neatly on his desk: chalk, lesson plans, and a stack of graded history papers. He straightened his tie and glanced at the old clock hanging above the blackboard. Exactly 8:15 as always. "Good morning, everyone," he said with his usual friendly smile as teenagers filtered in. Tom had been teaching American history at Jefferson for almost 8 years now. The kids liked him because he made the past come alive with stories that seemed almost too detailed to be from textbooks. The other teachers appreciated his reliability and the way he never gossiped in the break room. Little Lisa from the front row raised her hand before class even started. "Mr. Wilson, did you bring those primary sources about the Cold War you promised?" Tom nodded, reaching for his worn leather briefcase. "I've got them right here." The classroom door burst open. 5 men in dark suits stormed in, badges held high. "FBI, everyone stay calm." The students froze in shock. One girl screamed. A boy knocked over his chair, scrambling backward. "Thomas Wilson." The lead agent stepped forward, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "You're under arrest for espionage and treason against the United States of America." Whispers erupted as the students watched their favorite teacher being handcuffed. Tom stood perfectly still, his face unreadable. "There must be some mistake," he said quietly. "No mistake." The agent pulled out his phone, showing Tom a grainy video. "This is you at Riverside Park 3 days ago, handing over classified documents to a known Russian intelligence officer." The school principal rushed in, face pale with shock. "What's happening here?" "Children, everyone out to the hallway now." As the students were ushered out, many looked back at their teacher with confusion and betrayal in their eyes. The quiet history teacher a spy? It seemed impossible. By lunchtime, the news had spread through the small town of Millfield like wildfire. Neighbors gathered on street corners, talking in hushed voices. "Always kept to himself," said the owner of the hardware store. "Polite but private," added the librarian. "Never would have guessed," agreed the mail carrier. At the police station, Tom sat alone in an interrogation room. His hands were folded neatly on the metal table as 2 FBI agents laid out the evidence. Security footage showing him exchanging packages with a man now identified as a foreign agent, bank statements with deposits of $10,000 appearing monthly, a flash drive found in his apartment containing what appeared to be classified defense information. "We've been tracking this leak for months," said Agent Thompson, slapping photos on the table. "Your fingerprints are all over these documents." Tom looked at the evidence with calm interest, as though examining artifacts from a historical period he taught about. "Fascinating," he murmured. "You find treason fascinating?" Agent Rodriguez leaned closer. "You're looking at life in prison, possibly worse." For the first time, Tom smiled slightly. "I find it fascinating how much work went into this setup." The agents exchanged glances. This wasn't the reaction of a guilty man caught red-handed, nor of an innocent man wrongfully accused. There was something unsettling about his composure. Meanwhile, the town erupted in shocked debates. Students gathered at the local diner, some crying, others angry. "He taught us about American heroes," said one football player, voice cracking. "How could he be a traitor?" The evening news showed Tom being led to the county courthouse in an orange jumpsuit. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Through it all, he walked with his head high, face betraying nothing. Back in his cell that night, Tom sat on the thin mattress and looked at the small bed window. He didn't appear worried or afraid. Instead, he pulled a thread from his sleeve and began making careful marks on the wall, counting days as though he knew exactly how many would pass before something important happened. The quiet history teacher had a secret, but perhaps not the one everyone thought. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse as Tom Wilson's case became the biggest story the small town had ever seen. Inside, prosecutors laid out what they called overwhelming evidence against the former history teacher. The defendant maintained a complex web of deception, Assistant District Attorney Diane Powell told reporters. She stood confidently on the courthouse steps, pointing to charts showing Tom's supposed connections to foreign agents. "We have digital records, eyewitness accounts, and physical evidence linking him directly to the sale of classified information." Back in his cell, Tom studied the case files his court-appointed attorney had brought him. He flipped through pages methodically, occasionally making notes in margins with a stubby pencil. His expression remained calm, almost detached, as though reviewing a student's homework rather than evidence that could send him to prison for life. "You should be more worried," said Jack Chen, the young lawyer assigned to his case. Jack had graduated law school just 3 years ago and had never handled anything bigger than drunk driving cases. His hands trembled slightly as he watched Tom examine the documents. "I don't need a high-priced defense team," Tom replied, looking up with a slight smile. "I need someone who will listen and follow instructions. Can you do that, Jack?" The young lawyer adjusted his glasses nervously. The bank records show deposits matching the dates of alleged document handoffs. Your computer had encrypted files that the FBI says contain classified military information. There's even DNA evidence linking you to the drop sites. He sighed. "They're sticking maximum penalty. Do you understand what that means?" Tom nodded, then pointed to a photograph of a witness. "This man here. The one who claims he saw me exchange documents. Look into his background." "What am I looking for?" Jack asked. "You'll know when you find it," Tom replied cryptically. Meanwhile, the small town of Millfield was divided. Some neighbors who had lived beside Tom for years were shocked at the accusations. "He helped me fix my roof after the storm last year," said old Mr. Peterson from next door. "Doesn't seem like something a trader would do." Others were convinced of his guilt. "Always writing in that notebook of his at the coffee shop," the barista told a local reporter. "Now we know what he was writing, secrets to sell to our enemies." As weeks passed, preparations for the trial intensified. The prosecution brought in experts from Washington, building what newspapers called an ironclad case. They displayed evidence in press conferences. A special pen found in Tom's apartment that contained a hidden camera, travel records showing he'd visited border towns during school breaks, phone records revealing calls to burner phones. Yet Jack Chen began noticing odd inconsistencies. When he ran background checks on key witnesses, some had histories that didn't add up. One claimed to be a birdwatcher who spotted Tom making a drop in the park, but his social media showed no interest in birds before the incident. Another witness had changed her testimony twice during questioning. "Something doesn't feel right," Jack told Tom during a late-night meeting in the detention center. "Keep digging," Tom encouraged. "And I need you to find someone for me. A retired Navy officer named Henderson. Don't call him. Don't email. Find where he lives and visit in person." "Why?" Jack asked. Tom leaned forward, speaking barely above a whisper. "Because we're being watched. And Henderson knows about something called Cerberus Gate." As Jack left the prison that night, he noticed a black SUV following his car. When he took an unexpected turn, the vehicle stayed with him. For the first time, he began to wonder if his quiet client was more than just a small-town teacher caught in a terrible mistake. The next morning, an envelope arrived at Jack's small law office. Inside was a single piece of paper with no signature, just 5 words. "They framed the wrong man." Jack Chen couldn't sleep. For 3 days straight, he'd been following Tom's cryptic leads, and what he found made his stomach twist with unease. He spread his notes across his small apartment floor, connecting threads of information with red string like detectives did in the movies. The security footage showing Tom at the park looked convincing at first glance, but when Jack studied it frame by frame as Tom had suggested, he noticed something strange. A slight digital shimmer around Tom's face in certain angles. He wasn't a tech expert, but even he could tell something was off. Jack called a college buddy who worked in video editing. "Is it possible to fake footage this convincingly?" "Sure, with the right software and skills," his friend replied. "But we're talking government-level resources. Who are you up against? The CIA?" Jack laughed nervously and changed the subject. Finding Henderson proved challenging. The retired Navy officer had gone off the grid, but Tom had given Jack a strange method to locate him: visit a specific bookstore, buy a biography of Theodore Roosevelt, and write a phone number inside the cover before leaving it on a particular shelf. Jack felt ridiculous doing it, like he was playing spy games. But 3 hours later, his phone rang from a blocked number. "You're Chen?" The voice was gruff, cautious. "Meet me at the fishing pier. 1 hour. Come alone." The old pier creaked under Jack's feet as he approached a weathered man in a baseball cap who was casting a fishing line into the dark water. No introduction was needed. "You're in over your head, son," Henderson said, eyes fixed on the bobbing lure. "Wilson isn't who you think he is, and he isn't who they say he is either." "Then who is he?" Jack asked, heart pounding. 8 years ago, something big went down. Operation Cerberus Gate. A team of deep cover operatives exposed a network of double agents selling our secrets. Some very powerful people got burned, people with friends in high places. Henderson reeled in his empty line. Wilson was part of that team. His real name isn't even Wilson. Jack's mind raced. "You're saying he's actually a CIA operative who helped catch traitors, and now those traitors' friends are returning the favor by framing him for exactly what they did." Henderson cast his line again. "The evidence against him is perfect because it was created by people who know exactly how to make it stick. People with access to resources and technology ordinary criminals don't have." "Why doesn't he just tell the truth in court?" Jack asked. Henderson laughed bitterly. "His identity is classified. If he reveals it without proper authorization, he violates national security law himself. They've put him in a perfect trap." "There must be someone who can help," Jack insisted. "Maybe." Henderson handed Jack a small flash drive. "This contains partial records from Cerberus Gate, not enough to prove everything, but enough to help you know where to look. Be careful who sees this. The people after Wilson have eyes everywhere." As if on cue, headlights appeared at the end of the pier. Henderson tensed. "We've got company. Go now through there." He pointed to a path leading through waterfront warehouses. "Don't look back." Jack clutched the drive and ran, heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, he heard car doors slam and men shouting. He ducked between buildings, splashed through puddles, and finally lost his pursuers in a crowded night market. Back in his apartment, doors locked and curtains drawn, Jack plugged in the drive with shaking hands. What he saw made him sink into his chair in disbelief. Operation reports, redacted names, and surveillance photos. Among them was a younger Tom Wilson in military gear, standing beside other agents. The file name, Team Cerberus, 2016. The next morning, Jack visited Tom in prison. Neither spoke until the guards stepped away. "You found Henderson," Tom said, not a question but a statement. Jack nodded. "I don't know whether to believe all this." Tom leaned forward. "The prosecution's star witness, Blackwood. Check where he was in June 2016. "Why?" "Because that's when I arrested him for selling military secrets to China." Tom's eyes held Jack's steadily, and now he's getting his revenge. Jack worked through the night, fueled by coffee and disbelief. He spread documents across his kitchen table, connecting dates and names. Tom was right. Blackwood, the prosecution's star witness, had been arrested in 2016 for selling military secrets. The case mysteriously disappeared from court records, but newspaper archives still mentioned it. The next morning, Jack visited the courthouse archives to check Blackwood's case. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, typed the case number into her computer. "That's strange," she said, pushing her glasses up. "It says this record was sealed by federal order." She lowered her voice. "That only happens for national security cases." As Jack left the courthouse, a black car pulled alongside him. The window rolled down to reveal a stern-faced man in a dark suit. "Mr. Chen, get in." It wasn't a request. Jack hesitated, then slid into the back seat. The car pulled away from the curb. "I'm Agent Taylor, Department of Justice." The man showed a badge briefly. "You're digging into matters above your clearance level." "My client has the right to a proper defense," Jack replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your client," Agent Taylor said, "is not who you think. And you're interfering with matters of national security. If that's true, why is he being tried in a regular court? Why not a military tribunal?" The agent's face revealed nothing. "Stop investigating Blackwood. Stop looking into Cerberus Gate, or you'll find yourself facing obstruction charges." The car stopped at a street corner. "This is your only warning." Jack got out, legs shaking. Instead of going home, he went to a small internet cafe and used a computer in the back corner. He searched for everything he could find about Cerberus Gate, covering his tracks as Henderson had taught him. Most searches led nowhere, But one old news article caught his eye. Intelligence community celebrates unidentified heroes. The photo showed a ceremony with faces blurred, but in the background was a banner with a three-headed dog symbol, Cerberus. Jack printed the article and hurried to the prison to see Tom. "They're watching me now," Jack whispered. "A DOJ agent warned me to stop." Tom nodded calmly. "That means you're getting close. Did you check Blackwood?" "His case was sealed, but I confirmed he was arrested, and I found this." Jack slid the article across the table. Tom glanced at it and smiled slightly. "Good. Now I need you to deliver a message to a woman named Lally at the Blue Harbor Diner. Tell her Winter Protocol is active. She'll know what it means." "Who is she?" "Someone who can help prove I'm being framed." Tom leaned closer. "Jack, the trial starts in 3 days. They'd fast-tracked everything to prevent exactly what we're doing. When you find Lally, things will move quickly." The Blue Harbor Diner was a small place near the fishing docks. Lily turned out to be a gray-haired waitress in her 60s who looked like everyone's grandmother. When Jack whispered the message, her friendly smile vanished. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and pulled him into the back office. "How do you know that phrase?" she demanded. "Tom Wilson sent me." Her eyes widened. "Tom? They got to Tom?" She paced the small room. "Winter Protocol means one of the team is compromised." She opened a drawer and pulled out an old flip phone. "I need to make calls." 20 minutes later, Jack watched in amazement as Lily transformed from a simple waitress into someone else entirely. Her posture straightened, her voice sharpened, and she issued precise instructions on the phone like a military commander. "Listen carefully," she told Jack when she finished. "3 people will contact you tomorrow. They'll have information that will help Tom, but you must follow their instructions exactly." She wrote a series of numbers on a napkin. "Memorize these. They're secure communication channels." "Who are you people?" Jack asked. Lally's eyes met his. "Let's just say Tom wasn't always a history teacher, and I wasn't always a waitress." She glanced at her watch. "Now go. You have 24 hours to prepare for what's coming." As Jack left, his phone buzzed with a news alert. "Prosecution seeks death penalty in Wilson espionage case. Trial expedited to highest priority." The courthouse buzzed with tension on the first day of the trial. News crews lined the steps, and security guards checked everyone twice before allowing them inside. Jack straightened his tie, trying to calm his nerves as he waited for the proceedings to begin. Tom sat beside him at the defense table, wearing a simple gray suit that the legal aid office had provided. Unlike his lawyer, he looked completely relaxed, almost as if he were watching a movie rather than fighting for his life. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Wilson," the bailiff called. The judge, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, entered and took a seat. "The United States versus Thomas Wilson," she announced. "Charges of espionage and treason against the United States. How does the defendant plead?" Jack stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Blackstone, delivered his opening statement with practiced confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence will show that the defendant systematically sold our nation's most guarded secrets to foreign powers. He betrayed not just his country, but every American citizen." Blackstone displayed surveillance photos, bank records, and computer files on a large screen. "This man," he pointed dramatically at Tom, "used his position as a beloved teacher to hide in plain sight while selling out his country." When Jack's turn came, he kept his statement simple as Tom had instructed. "The defense will show that my client has been framed by individuals with the expertise and resources to create convincing false evidence." Several jurors exchanged skeptical glances. The prosecution called their first witness, an FBI digital forensics expert who testified about encrypted files found on Tom's computer. Jack cross-examined him as Tom had prepared him to do. "You testified these encryption methods are sophisticated. Could they be government-level encryption?" "Objection," Blackstone called. "Speculation." "I'll rephrase," Jack said. "In your expert opinion, who typically uses this level of encryption?" The expert hesitated. "Generally, it's limited to high-level government or military applications." "Like the CIA, perhaps," Jack suggested casually. Blackstone jumped to his feet. "Your Honor." "Withdrawn," Jack said, but he planted the seed. The second witness was Blackwood himself, the man Tom had allegedly arrested years ago. He testified seeing Tom exchange documents with a known foreign agent. As Jack began cross-examination, he noticed 3 unfamiliar men enter the courtroom and sit in the back row. They wore plain dark suits, but something about their posture screamed government. "Mr. Blackwood," Jack began, following Tom's instructions exactly, "where were you on June 14, 2016? Blackwood's face tightened. "I don't recall specifically." "Let me refresh your memory. Were you in federal custody after being arrested for selling military secrets to foreign agents?" "Objection," Blackstone shouted. "Relevance." "Your Honor," Jack replied, "the witness's credibility is relevant, especially if he has a personal vendetta against my client." The judge leaned forward. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counselor." Blackwood's face had gone pale. "Those charges were dropped." "Were they dropped, or were they classified?" Jack pressed. "Isn't it true that you were arrested by a covert CIA team named Cerberus Gate?" The courtroom erupted. Blackstone demanded a sidebar with the judge. The 3 men in the back row stood up, and one spoke quietly into his wrist. During the commotion, Tom leaned toward Jack. "Now," he whispered, "ask to present the video evidence." When order was restored, Jack stood. "Your Honor, the defense requests permission to present video evidence that has been secured in a bank safety deposit box for its protection." "What video?" Blackstone demanded. "This wasn't in discovery." "Because it would have disappeared if we had revealed it earlier," Jack explained. "It shows several prosecution witnesses conspiring to frame my client." The judge studied Jack's face, then Tom's. After a long moment, she nodded. "I'll allow it, but this better be relevant, counselor." Jack inserted the flash drive Lily had given him into the courtroom's computer system. The lights dimmed, and the screen lit up. What played next caused the entire courtroom to fall into stunned silence. The courtroom video began with a grainy image of a hotel room. 4 people sat around a table covered with laptops and documents: Blackwood, the FBI analyst who had testified earlier, and 2 other prosecution witnesses waiting to be called. The date stamp showed it was from just 2 weeks after Tom's arrest. "The video quality has been authenticated by 3 independent experts," Jack announced as the footage played. On screen, Blackwood laughed and raised a glass. "To perfect revenge. 8 years in the making." "Are you sure this will work?" asked one of the others. "Wilson isn't some nobody, if he's who you say he is." "He can't reveal who he really is without violating his oath," Blackwood interrupted. "That's the beauty of it. And we have friends in the right places to make sure the evidence sticks." The analyst opened a laptop. "The facial mapping software is complete. We can put Wilson anywhere we need him to be." He demonstrated how they had superimposed Tom's face onto someone else's body in the park surveillance video. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The judge hammered her gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in the court!" Blackstone, the prosecutor, stood frozen, his face drained of color as his own witnesses were exposed on screen. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of this conspiracy." The 3 men in dark suits who had been sitting in the back row moved swiftly toward the front. The tallest one flashed a badge to the bailiff, who immediately stepped aside. "Your Honor," the man said, "I am Director William Harrington of the Central Intelligence Agency. I request an immediate recess and a meeting in your chambers." The judge, visibly shaken, agreed. "Court is in recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The jury is instructed not to discuss today's revelations with anyone." As the courtroom emptied, 2 of the government men flanked Tom while the 3rd escorted Jack. They were led through a back hallway to the judge's chambers where armed guards now stood at attention. Inside, Director Harrington addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, what I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels. Everyone in this room has just been temporarily cleared for this information only." He nodded to Tom. "This man is not Thomas Wilson. His real name is Jonathan Hayes, one of our most valuable deep cover operatives." The judge stared at Tom, or Jonathan, in disbelief. "If this is true, why didn't you say something earlier?" "Because, Your Honor," Tom replied, speaking in a voice that somehow sounded different, more authoritative, "revealing my identity without authorization would itself be a breach of national security." Director Harrington explained, 8 years ago, Agent Hayes led Operation Cerberus Gate, which uncovered a network of double agents selling military secrets. Several of those implicated had powerful connections and escaped prosecution. The conspirators you saw on that video were among them. So this whole trial, the judge began, was revenge, Tom finished. They couldn't get to me while I was active, so they waited until I was in deep cover as a teacher. They knew I couldn't defend myself without breaking cover. But why reveal yourself now? Jack asked. You could have gone to prison rather than break your cover. Tom smiled slightly. Because they made a critical mistake. By making this so public, they triggered protocols we established after Cerberus Gate. Any major legal proceeding against any team member automatically triggers an internal investigation. Director Harrington nodded. When Agent Hayes was arrested, silent alarms went off throughout our system. We've been watching, gathering evidence of the conspiracy. The video you showed today was just the tip of the iceberg. The judge removed her glasses, suddenly looking tired. So what happens now, Director? Now, he said, we clean house. The people behind this have exposed themselves by trying to frame Agent Hayes. But first, we need to formally dismiss these charges and seal this case. Jack stared at his client with new eyes. The quiet history teacher had been a fiction. The real man sitting beside him was someone else entirely, someone who had anticipated everything, who had turned a trap meant to destroy him into a trap for his enemies. Was any of it real? Jack asked quietly. The teaching. Tom's eyes softened. That part was real. I found I had a talent for it. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by black SUVs with government plates. The morning headlines across the country screamed variations of the same story. CIA agent 4AMED, espionagtyl expiosis teacher REVALED as secret agent. Camera crews camped outside the courthouse as the judge formally dismissed all charges against Tom Wilson, or rather, Jonathan Hayes. In the aftermath, Blackwood and his conspirators were led away in handcuffs, facing the very charges they had tried to pin on Jonathan. The prosecutor, Blackstone, issued a public statement claiming no knowledge of the frame-up, but his resignation was announced the following day. Jack found himself suddenly famous. His phone rang constantly with offers from big law firms impressed by his handling of the case. News vans parked outside his apartment, reporters shouting questions whenever he appeared. How did you know he was innocent? Did you suspect he was CIA all along? Will you work for the government now? Jack avoided them all, following strict instructions from Director Harrington about what he could and couldn't say. The case was quickly becoming a national sensation, the kind of story people couldn't stop talking about. 2 weeks after the trial's dramatic end, Jack received a package containing a first-class ticket to Washington, D.C., and an invitation to a private ceremony at a nondescript government building. Security was tight, retinal scans, fingerprints, multiple ID checks, before he was finally led into a small auditorium. Inside, he recognized faces from the courtroom, Lily from the diner, Henderson from the pier, the 3 men in dark suits. All wore formal attire now, with small pins on their lapels that Jack didn't recognize. Director Harrington approached from across the room. Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. Where's Tom, Jonathan? Jack asked. He'll be here, the director assured him. But first, I wanted to thank you personally. Your work was instrumental in exposing a conspiracy that went deeper than you know. We've arrested 17 people across 3 agencies. Jack shook his head in disbelief. I still can't believe any of this is real. Real enough that we'd like to offer you a position with our legal team, Harrington said casually. You've already been vetted and shown remarkable aptitude for this kind of work. Before Jack could respond, a side door opened and Jonathan walked in. Gone was the mild-mannered history teacher. This man moved with the confident grace of someone trained for danger. Yet when he smiled at Jack, there was genuine warmth there. Good to see you, Counselor, Jonathan said, shaking his hand. Thank you for believing in me. Did you plan all of this from the beginning? Jack asked. Using me, the trial, everything. Jonathan shook his head. Not everything. I couldn't have predicted they'd move against me when they did. But I had contingencies in place. People like Lily and Henderson watching out for me. And finding you, that was lucky. I needed someone smart enough to follow the breadcrumbs, but unknown enough not to be on their radar. What happens to you now? Jack asked. Now I disappear again. New name, new location. A flicker of sadness crossed Jonathan's face. It's the job. Later, as the ceremony concluded, Jonathan handed Jack a small box. A gift. For saving my life. Inside was an antique pocket watch, intricately engraved with a pattern Jack recognized, the three-headed dog of Cerberus. I can't accept this, Jack protested. It's not just a thank you, Jonathan explained. It's an invitation. If you ever want to do more with your talents than corporate law, open it and follow the instructions inside. They parted ways at the building's entrance. Jack watched as Jonathan climbed into a waiting car and disappeared into Washington traffic, knowing he would never see that version of the man again. 6 months later, a postcard arrived at Jack's new office in his hometown, where he had chosen to open a small practice instead of joining a big firm. The postcard showed a high school in a small town in Oregon. On the back was a simple message, teaching history again. Some covers are worth keeping. In the corner was a tiny drawing of a three-headed dog,